The day the rivers began to dry, the people of Umwaka village could not understand what had gone wrong. For as long as anyone could remember, the rivers had always flowed, feeding their farms, their animals, and their bodies. The fields were green, the air was fresh, and the people had enough to eat. But now the streams were shrinking, the wells were turning to mud, and the earth itself seemed angry. Some of the elders whispered among themselves that the gods were punishing them for what they had done. They were right. The curse had begun the day they killed Dorcas, an innocent pregnant woman. Dorcas was not born in Umwaka village. She was a stranger who had married a young farmer named Ebuka. Ebuka loved her with all his heart, and their love was pure and strong. She was known for her kindness, her gentle smile, and her way of helping anyone in need. When an old man fell ill, she cooked food for him. When children were hungry, she gave them fruits from her garden. Even though she had no children of her own yet, she treated every child in the village as her own. And when she finally became pregnant, Ebuka rejoiced. He believed their home would be filled with laughter and life. But not everyone shared in their happiness. Some people in the village, especially the women who envied her beauty and kindness, began to spread rumors. They said Dorcas was a witch. They said she had used charms to tie Ebuka to herself. They claimed her pregnancy was not normal, that she was carrying an evil child that would bring destruction. These words spread like fire in the dry season. Soon, even people who had once smiled at Dorcas began to look at her with suspicion. The trouble grew worse when strange things happened in the village. A goat suddenly died, a child had fever, a roof collapsed during the night. Instead of seeing these things as ordinary, the people began to whisper, "It is Dorcas. She is the one bringing bad luck." Ebuka tried to defend her. He stood before the elders, saying, "Dorcas has done no wrong. She is my wife and the mother of my unborn child. She is innocent." But the more he defended her, the more the people grew angry. They accused him of being blinded by love. One evening, the chief priest of the village shrine stood in the village square and declared that the gods were angry. He said the village had been cursed by a woman carrying an evil child. His voice was loud, his face painted with chalk and red dye. "If we do not act," he warned, "our rivers will dry, our crops will die, and our children will starve. The gods demand sacrifice." The people shouted in agreement, their fears boiling over into madness. "Sacrifice her! Sacrifice her!" they cried. Ebuka begged them to listen to reason. He fell to his knees, holding Dorcas by the hand, pleading with the elders, "She is innocent. Do not harm her. She has done nothing." But the crowd had made up their mind. Fear is a strong poison, and it had already clouded their hearts. That very night, a group of men broke into Ebuka's home. Dorcas, heavy with pregnancy, screamed and clung to her husband. But they dragged her away. Ebuka fought with all his strength, but they struck him down, leaving him bleeding on the floor. The villagers carried Dorcas to the edge of the sacred forest. They tied her hands with ropes and accused her of witchcraft. She cried and begged them to spare her unborn child, but their ears were deaf to mercy. The chief priest raised his staff and commanded them to kill her. And so under the moonlight, Dorcas and her unborn baby were beaten and stoned until her cries fell silent. The land grew quiet after her death. The people thought they had saved themselves, but they had only sown destruction. At first, nothing seemed strange. Days passed and life appeared normal. But then the rivers began to shrink. The great Umuwaka River, which had never run dry, even in the harshest dry season, began to thin into a small stream. Wells produced muddy water. Fish disappeared. Soon the crops began to wither. The maize stalks turned brown, the yam leaves shriveled, and the cassava roots cracked in the dry soil. Cows mooed with hunger, goats bleated in pain, and chickens dropped dead one by one. The children grew thin, their bellies swollen with hunger. The elders gathered, troubled. They poured libations, sacrificed goats, and chanted prayers at the shrine, but the land refused to heal. The priest said the gods were still angry. "Someone has shed innocent blood," he declared. "Until justice is done, the curse will not leave us." It was then that Ibuka, still mourning his wife, rose up in the village square. His eyes were red with sorrow, his voice broken but strong. "You killed Dorcas, my wife, the mother of my child. She was innocent, and you knew it. Now the land cries with her blood. The rivers you see drying are her tears. The crops dying are her pain. Until you confess and beg for forgiveness, this curse will never end." At first, the people shouted him down. They called him mad with grief, but soon more strange things began to happen. A group of hunters who had mocked Dorcas before her death went missing in the forest. A woman who had thrown the first stone at Dorcas lost all her children to sickness. The chief priest himself fell ill, his body covered with sores that refused to heal. Fear returned to the people, but this time it was not fear of Dorcas. It was fear of the curse they had brought upon themselves. Some began to whisper at night, confessing their guilt. Mothers told their children how they had joined the crowd. Fathers admitted their silence when they should have spoken. Ibuka refused to eat or drink. He sat by Dorcas's grave every day, talking to her as if she could still hear him. "They will pay, my love. They will remember your kindness. The land itself will not forgive them until they repent." One night, the oldest woman in the village had a dream. She saw Dorcas standing by the river, her clothes white, her belly still full, and her face calm but stern. Dorcas pointed to the village and said, "They must cleanse my blood with truth. Only then will the rivers flow again." The old woman woke up and told the villagers her dream. It spread quickly, and for the first time, they began to realize the depth of their sin. They went to Ibuka and begged him to lead them in cleansing the land. Ibuka stood over Dorcas's grave and said, "You cannot undo what you have done. But if you are truly sorry, then confess before her grave. Tell the truth, speak it loud so the gods can hear you." One by one, the villagers came forward. Some wept as they confessed how they had lied. Others cried as they admitted they had been carried by fear and envy. Even the chief priest dragged himself forward, his skin burning with sores, and fell on his knees, crying for forgiveness. For 7 days, the village mourned Dorcas. They brought food to Ibuka, who refused to eat until the 7th day. On the 7th day, he poured palm wine on her grave and said, "Let your spirit find peace, my love. Let the land remember your kindness." That night, rain fell for the first time in many months. It was not heavy, but it was enough to wet the earth. The rivers did not return immediately, but slowly, day by day, water began to flow again. The crops sprouted new leaves. The animals began to recover. Life returned little by little, but the memory of Dorcas never left them. From that day forward, Umuwaka village told her story as a warning. They taught their children, "Do not shed innocent blood. Do not let envy blind your heart. The land remembers, the rivers remember, and the spirits of the innocent never sleep." Ibuka never remarried. He lived the rest of his days in silence, always visiting Dorcas's grave. And when he finally died as an old man, the villagers buried him beside her, saying, "Let them rest together, for even death could not break their bond." And so, the story of Dorcas became a scar on the history of Umaka village, a reminder of the danger of fear, envy, and false judgment. To this day, the people say the rivers whisper her name whenever the wind passes over the water. Dorcas, Dorcas, Dorcas. Thanks for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe.